Giagich Walter. You may wonder why today I am greeting you in Irish. The reason is that my talk this time is on Francis Joseph Biggar, who in the late 19th and the early decades of the 20th century was closely associated with and indeed championed the cause of the Irish language movement in Ulster as one of his many interests. Local history and the antiquity of Ireland were also close to his heart. Today, many who have an interest in these things will always refer back to him on many points, while in his own time he was a living legend. Francis Joseph Biggar was born on the 17th of July, 1865 in Belfast. The Biggar family had come to Ulster in the 17th century from Nithsdale, Dumfriesshire, and settled in the Mollusk and Carnmoney areas of County Antrim. A townland in that area, Biggarstown, commemorates their living there. The earlier Biggars often spelt their name with an A, though our subject's name is Bigger. Francis Joseph was the seventh son of a seventh son 3 times over. The family had business interests as merchants in High Street in Belfast from the 17th century, near the present Crown Entry. For many years, a part of that entry was called Biggar's Entry. Such was their importance. In the 17th century, due to a shortage of coinage in Ireland, the Biggars, like many merchants of the day, issued their own. Some of these coins are still in existence. Francis Joseph's father moved to Liverpool when the boy was young. The family returned to the north of Ireland when he was in his early teens, and he went to school at Belfast Inst. Living in the Carnmoney area when young, it is said, fired him with romantic notions of the 1798 rebellion of the United Irishmen, whose story has many connections with that area. After Inst, Francis Joseph matriculated at Queen's College in Belfast. From there, he proceeded to train for 4 years as an articled apprentice with Henry and William Seeds, leading Belfast solicitors. It was in Dublin afterwards, attending law lectures, that he met up again with a school pal from Inst, George W. Strachan. They subsequently set up in partnership in Belfast as solicitors in Ray's Buildings at the corner of Royal Avenue and Donegal Street, and later at Northern Bank Chambers along the same street. Some of your listeners, Walter, might know the name of the firm. His association with Strachan lasted until Francis Joseph's death, though some maintain that he cared more about his other activities than the legal profession. These activities were wide-ranging and included being a member of the Gaelic League and being heavily involved in its Belfast activities in the promotion of the Irish language revival. He was also a member of the Belfast Naturalists Field Club and chairman of this body, and also its secretary for 14 years. He was a governor of Inst and was, from 1888, a member and later fellow of the Royal Society of Antiquarians. In 1895, he helped in the resurrection of the Ulster Journal of Archaeology, and with Robert W. Young was its joint editor. Later, Biggar took over completely. In 1894, he was elected to the Royal Irish Academy. From this, we can see that he was a man of many parts. And to top all of these activities, he contributed regularly to the newspapers and magazines of the day, writing articles on Ireland in ancient times and folklore. Last year, a friend and colleague of mine in the South Belfast Historical Society, Roy Allen, who has been on your programmes, loaned me a copy of Francis Joseph's account of the life and death of William Orr, the famous United Irishman. It is a riveting, well-written and well-researched piece of work. Biggar wrote about all his heroes of '98. Indeed, it was something of an obsession with him. In 1916, he published an account of the penal days in Ireland in the 18th century. This was courageous, I feel, as he was an Anglican, pointing up the crippling difficulties faced by Catholics and Presbyterians in those times. In addition to writing, Biggar gave lectures all over Ireland on the topic of his native land, her customs and way of life in the past. In this way, he hoped to keep alive folk memories and by encouraging people in particular areas to keep and restore buildings and monuments of historical interest. He gave much out of his own financial resources to further this aim. Thanks to him and through his labours, we have monuments such as the slab of Mourne granite, which was placed over the reputed graves in Downpatrick of St. Patrick, Bridget and Columkill, where tradition tells us they were buried. The high crosses in the same precincts of Down Cathedral and at Dromore, as well as the restoration of Shane's Castle at Ardglass, are other reminders of his work. Friars Bush Cemetery in Belfast, now in the process of being restored, has reminders of him too, in that he placed the stone reputed to be near the grave of the original friar. In this instance, though, some local historians would say that this gesture was much more of conjecture by Biggar than historical reality. The Ulster Literary Theatre, started up at the turn of the last century, was another institution to which he was associated from its foundation. To digress slightly for a moment or two, Walter, another Biggar, a second cousin of Francis Joseph and called Joseph Gillies Biggar, was regarded, it is said by many, to be one of the most hated men by the English establishment of his time. His dates were 1828 to 1891. Francis Joseph, our subject, was very proud of him, and indeed a large portrait of Joseph Gillies Biggar took pride of place in Francis Joseph's residence at Ardree on Belfast's Antrim Road. This Joseph Gillies Biggar, who was a Belfast pork butcher, was a smallish, hunchbacked man, and was Home Rule MP for County Cavan from 1874 to 1890. He was a thorn in the flesh of English parliamentarians by his obstructionist tactics of holding up parliamentary debate and wasting time in order to focus the House on the Irish question. He was a very able lieutenant of Charles Stuart Parnell and was a member of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. One evening in the House of Commons, he had the future King Edward VII, then the Prince of Wales, ejected from the chamber under the I Spy Strangers rule. He had spotted him listening to a debate from the Strangers' gallery. Like all of the Biggars, including Francis Joseph, Joseph Gillies Biggar was brought up in the Protestant faith, but he converted to Catholicism. There is an amusing story told, Walter, of his father hearing of this conversion from a newspaper. The father enclosed the cutting with a short note to his son, stating simply, "Dear son, is this true?" Joseph Gillies Biggar returned the note to his father with only 4 further words. They were, "Dear father, it is." To return to Francis Joseph, He was prominently involved in the centenary celebrations in 1898 of the 1798 Rising. For instance, he marked the graves of several who were involved, including the Reverend Steele Dixon in Clifton Street Cemetery. Also near Toome Bridge in County Antrim, he restored the memorial of Roddy McCorley, about whom there is a famous ballad, and who was hanged in that locality. Also close to his heart was the staging of the Glens of Antrim Feis, of which he took a prominent role, and in fostering home industry by the local people of that area. His home at Ardree, up on the Antrim Road in Belfast on the way to Bellevue, was a centre for Irish culture. Later, it was where Joe Devlin, the famous Belfast MP, lived. When in 1902 the supposed remains of Henry Joy McCracken, one of the leaders of 98, were found in the old cemetery in Church Lane, Belfast, hard by the present St George's Church, Biggar brought the bones to Ardree and reverently kept them for 7 years until they were reburied in the McCracken family plot in Clifton Street. Francis Joseph was a close friend of the many famous people who were involved in the Gaelic revival at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries. Names like Sir Roger Casement, John Vinacombe, Mrs. Alice Stopford Green, Shane Leslie, Sir Percival Graves, R.A. Morrow and John Keary spring to mind. He was a leading light too in the organisation of the first Belfast Feis in 1898, which interestingly enough was a largely unionist affair. For Cathal O'Byrne, writer of As I Roved Out, that masterpiece of Belfast and district miscellany, he was a revered figure, coming to life in many pages of the book and in many different situations. Biggar was a philanthropic man. It is recorded that a dish filled with coins, which he called St. Anthony's tray, was always just inside the door of his house. These coins were for the poor who called. The poor were often given food as well, though he could be shy and reserved, even brusque to those he did not know well. Out past Glengormley he built 6 small cottages. These were near the Crown and Shamrock public house. His tenants at a small rent were labouring people. Francis Joseph called the terrace the Sally Gardens. To illustrate, Walter, how well known he was throughout Ireland is the story of the blind piper, told to me by Sean McGettigan of the West Belfast Historical Society. You have heard of the McPeak musical family. Well, long ago the original Francie of the family was taught by a blind piper from Galway. Biggar arranged this, and arranged for this man who spoke only Irish to be brought from that city all the way by train to Belfast through Dublin, by simply having a placard placed on the man's chest on which it said simply, "Deliver to Francis Joseph Biggar, Belfast." The man arrived safely. Isn't that remarkable? Biggar was a very loyal member of the Church of Ireland, and was very much involved in his local church, St. Peter's, Antrim Road, as well as being a member of the Masonic Order. One of his brothers was the well-known Belfast doctor, Sir Edward Coey Biggar. Francis Joseph's father died in 1890, and thereafter the love he had for his mother grew even deeper. It is said he took a fresh bunch of flowers from his garden every day. He was a knowledgeable gardener, and placed them by her chair. After her death, he did not allow her chair to be sat on. He never married. At the time of the gun running in Ireland prior to the First World War, he took an active part in the shipping of arms through Howth County, Dublin, intended for the Irish volunteers. This was to counteract, as he saw it, the activities of the Ulster Volunteers and their efforts to resist Home Rule by force. So he was not purely a romantic dreamer, but had a strong realistic side to his character. But even with his taking sides on the Ulster question, those with whom he differed politically were never his enemies. All through the turbulent years from 1912 to 1921, I find this extremely noteworthy. He was a friend to all who knew him in any capacity. At the time of his death in December 1926, shortly after being awarded an MA from Queen's, every section of the community here made known their sadness. Biggar had over 3,000 volumes in his own library at Ardree, which he bequeathed to the Belfast Central Library, who today hold his archive. He was buried in the old cemetery at Mollusk, out beyond Glengormley, near to another 98 hero of his, Jemmy Hope, the Brown Square Shankle weaver. On a visit to the site last year, I found Biggar's Celtic cross on his grave broken. Ironic, isn't it, that he who did so much to restore the graves of others needed his own restored. Ardree too has gone, now replaced by modern housing. Only the original black pillars remain. Walter, it is no exaggeration to state that references to Biggar occur in nearly every book of Northern culture of the past. I have been allowed access to a poem of tribute to Biggar, written by the Belfast poet of the past, Joseph Campbell, his friend. I feel it sums up the subject of my talk today admirably, and I'd like to finish off by reading it. I think I see him now as in his prime, a short-built, thick-set, brown-faced, eager man, born of the seed of fighters, who time of old had fought for love of man, and found their touchstone in the simple words, giving and forgiving. A brown-faced, quiet-mannered human man, whose noble mind was mirrored in his eye, who loved his people and the land that bore him, and the lowly peasant people of the land, and the ardent poets of the land, those chosen souls, those dowered visionaries, who dream and dream and dreaming do. A worshipper of good in nature, a lover of song and music, men's fool in his tastes and quiet in his dress, kind to the poor and hearty in his talk, fond of a pleasant story, fast in his friendships, a reader of ancient books, a writer too, a prop of institutions, traditions, ceremonies, combative ever, but offending never, a dispenser of gifts and hospitalities, a diviner of thoughts, a patron and friend of the young, an urger of native effort, the loveliest soul, the lordliest type of mortal Irishman, it has been, or will be, my lot to know. Slán agat, Walter.
Jim O'Hagan, and to end today, a reminder of the terrace called the Sally Gardens, built by Francis Joseph Biggar, sung by Terence Blackburn with the Belfast Harp Orchestra.
Down by the Sally Gardens, my love and I did meet. She She passed the Sally Gardens with little snow-white feet. She bid me take love easy as the leaves grow on the tree. But I was young and foolish, with her did not agree. In a field by the river, my love and I did stand, and on my leaning shoulder she placed her snow-white hand. She bid me take love easy as the grass grows on the rills, but I was young